We're going to call to order the June 15th meeting of the West Sacramento City Council Redevelopment Agency and Financing Authority. We're going to begin tonight, as we do each week, with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to invite our guests to join the council and staff in the pledge, which tonight will be led by Ms. Evelyn Hayden. The council did meet in closed session this evening to confer with our real property negotiator regarding the parcels listed in the agenda, to confer with our legal counsel regarding approval to initiate legal action. No action was taken. And to confer with our labor negotiator regarding negotiations with Local 39 and with unrepresented employees. So we'll now proceed to our general administration agenda, item 1A, which is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the City Council. As is noted in our agenda, we're precluded from taking action on items brought up under item 1A, but it is an important opportunity for a public forum. We do ask that anyone wishing to address the council on this or any other item this evening to please fill out one of the yellow cards that's available at the door and turn it into the city clerk. In front of the clerk is a timer that we use to make sure that everyone has the chance to be heard, and to that end we ask that all the comments be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Also in front of the clerk is a flip chart which indicates the current agenda item that we are currently considering. We also recognize that for some folks, speaking in public promotes a little bit of anxiety, so we do ask that there not be any boos or catcalls or applause or other forms of demonstration in our chambers, and that we maintain a civil discourse. So with that, we have one request to speak under item 1A, and it's by Jennifer Seeger from Valley Vision. Welcome.
Hello, well, thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight. My name is Jennifer Seeger. I'm from Valley Vision, and I'm the Regional Coordinator for Energy Upgrade California. The Energy Commission program is designed to accelerate the installation of energy efficiency investments in renewable energy for California property owners. The first valuable feature of this new program is that all energy rebates and incentives are consolidated in one place on a new web portal at www.energyupgradeca.org. I would like to call your attention to two important funding opportunities on the web portal for property owners in the city of West Sacramento. First, there are substantial rebates available from California utilities for property owners who invest in energy efficiency. Rebates from $1,000 to $4,000 are available for property owners participating in PG&E's whole house programs. These whole house programs apply the latest in building science to make sure that all parts of the house are working together for the best reduction in energy, the best dollar savings, and home safety. The second is another program that I think will interest some of your constituents, and this is a low-interest loan program to finance energy upgrades for low and moderate income property owners. CHF, a California Joint Powers Authority, is offering grants and loans with a 3% fixed interest rate for property owners in Yolo County with household incomes between $45,480 and $121,280. These loans are only available through March of 2012, or until the money runs out, so it's important to get the word out to as many property owners as we can so they can take advantage of this funding. Once property owners find the rebates, grants and loans to make energy efficiency upgrades, they're going to want to find qualified contractors. This information is also available on the web portal, and these contractors have gone through very specific training. There's also money through the Energy Upgrade California program for workforce development. And a contractor can go onto this web portal, find where there's scholarship money, find where there are free participation workshops, find out how to get involved with this program. So I want to thank you, and I am available if anyone would like to talk about this program further. There are many elements to the program that I don't have time to go into at this point, but thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's the only request we have to speak under item 1A, so we're going to proceed to item 1B, which is Council Communications. Are there any reports or other communications this evening? Mr. Christoph, Mayor Pro Tem Christoph.
Yes, on Thursday, June 9th, the West Sacramento JPA Flood Control Agency met, and have good news. Our bond, we went out for bond a few days before that, and it closed quite fine. It closed on June 9th. The issuance was 13.6 million, and the city's going to net out a little over 12 million. All of those funds will go towards our levee repairs, and there's some other good news too. The bids that came in on the CHP EIP came back about $4 million less than what the engineer had originally projected, and so that money gets to move into this same pot in essence and move towards the Sacramento River EIP. So things are moving forward, and we're looking forward to getting these works done. We did continue one item, and that item will be continued until June 30th, and that was eminent domain on a piece of property up there at the river site, because we do need that properties for the construction of the levee improvements. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you. Other reports? Mr. Ledesma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On June 8th, we met for the Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District. We had our regularly scheduled meeting then. A couple of follow-up items from that meeting. I had mentioned earlier that there was an award for the Clean Air Funds, which were a subcommittee, which I served on, also approved, but the full board approved the Clean Air Funds. One of the things that came up, I should say 2 awards were given to the Yolo County Transportation District for some programs that helps our residents get access to transportation, especially kids during the summertime. And but one of the takeaways from that the full board had a concern about was that we only, in Yolo County, only had 3 requests for funding, and which is down significantly year over year. So I did ask them to work with our staff to make sure we get communication out plenty of time next year so that we can urge more agencies and more businesses to apply for those Clean Air Funds. There was a rollover amount, and I don't have that off the top of my head, that will be going into next year's fund. So, secondly, there was a report that the Air Quality Management District did provide. It was from the EPA and new stats on some new studies they put out on hazards in air quality in certain parts of the state, and national stats, I should say, in regions and by the state. They looked at by census tracts, and unfortunately, there were a number of areas that were impacted by, they showed as significant air problems, or I should say, that's not problems, but certainly areas that they bear more study by the Air Quality Management District. So I've asked staff to begin working with the Air Quality Management District to look at, as West Sac did have a couple of areas of concern. So hopefully staff has touched base with the Air Quality Management District, start working and understanding those reports from the EPA. So anyway, there's a couple of items to follow up on. Thank you.
Mr. Villegas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On June 6th, Councilmember Ledesma and I met with members of the trustees of the school district for the city school 2x2, and we continued dialogue on the use of the or the continued changes of the memorandum of understanding to make sure that folks are able to use the field and track, which was part of the original recreation joint use project. And then we also had some conversation about continuing to update the respective members of the committee on projects of mutual interest and projects that we're working on, to make sure that everybody's on the same page as we have conversations about different projects. We want to make sure we don't lose sight of the things that we are working on. We have had and have made progress on working collectively on over the years, so we'll continue to update the committee on those things. Let's see, on June 8th, the Sacramento County Regional Sanitation District met. We continue to wait for response to our appeal to the State Water Quality Control Board regarding the NPDES permit that we submitted at the beginning of the year. And not real hopeful about that, but continue to wait for resolution on that issue. And then we also held a public hearing on the Prop 218 public hearing notice for the rate increase for the expansion of the plant, the $2 billion expansion of that plant as required by the state. We adopted scenario 4, which takes us out 10 years, albeit the Prop 218 notice is only for 3 years. The increase does not go into effect until 11/12, and that'll begin with a $2 increase on those fees. And as a reminder, we continue to still be one of the lowest, our fees continue to be one of the lowest in the region. And one of the things that we talked about, staff is going to continue to work on, is as those fee increases occur and folks start to get their bills next year, they start to wonder what that's about. Staff has had extensive conversation with each other about how to make sure that the bill clearly delineates, this is a bill that's coming as a result of state action to expand a plant that we don't have any control over. And these are actions that were taken that were out of our hands, and clearly spell that out so folks know when they get the bill, this is what it's coming for, and this is as a result of actions that were taken by the state. And then on, June 13th, the Yolo County Transportation District, we met, and the only item was we adopted a budget for the 11-12 fiscal year. That's it. Oh, and the port. Earlier this evening, the port met, and we adopted a biennial budget, and we received notice about a $2.6 million housing development grant for the new Beacon entrance. Is that right? Capture that correctly? Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, that's our community development grant that the city applied for. It's awarded
Yes.
to the city.
Sorry.
And we saw it several months ago when we reviewed the CDBG applications. It was a significant amount of money for a new entrance at the port to serve the West Coast Recycling and other facilities there.
Yep.
I had a couple. The major one I want to report on is SACOG. We had a transportation committee, which I chair earlier in the month, but the full board is meeting tomorrow. We're going to take up the draft preferred scenario for the next MTP and the Sustainable Communities Plan, which is the major transportation spending blueprint for the region. And I think I've described to the council before, the main challenges that we're facing in constructing this document this time is our forecasts for growth, economic growth, population growth, have to be dialed way back based on reality. That's the federal government insists that you actually have this stuff based on your latest on the latest actual data. So we have to dial that back, which doesn't sound that difficult, but then we have to start cutting transportation projects out of the regional plan, out of the regional budget to reflect that. It's the first time we've had to do that, at least in a generation. We've always been growing, and so it's always been a debate about what projects to add. This is the first time we're having to reduce them. And so we've been having a pitched but quiet battle about that. And so we have a draft. We had our very first draft of the MTP, the core of the MTP at our last meeting, and it'll be up tomorrow morning at the full SACOG board. It reallocates population growth and employment growth in the region. For us, and in West Sacramento, in the planning period, it projects that our total employment would grow from 32,000 to 53,000 during that planning period. So adding a roughly 2/3 more employee count in the city. That's more than half of all employment growth that's projected for all of Yolo County. For housing units, that we would grow from 17,000 housing units to by another 18,000 housing units to about 36,000 housing units, so a doubling of the number of housing units between now and the end of that planning period. And that also is roughly just over half of all housing unit growth for the entirety of Yolo County. Those figures aren't radically different from the last MTP in share, but they are somewhat different in part because the MTP, this land use forecast is based on updated housing demand information as well. And if you may have seen the article in the paper today about the UCLA's forecast of where actual housing recovery is occurring, and although that forecast is not part of the MTP planning scenario, the data is the same that is informing both, which is that the housing markets are rebounding in places like here and not in places in the high growth suburban areas that were in the formerly high-growth suburban areas that were the focus of the boom before. And that reflects a lot of the market trends and a lot of the preferences that we've talked about here for many, many years around the changing demographics and changing preferences and all of that. But that's one of the reasons that as we've dialed back at the regional scale, dialed back our projections on housing growth, they're dialed back a little bit less here than they are, say, in Dunnigan or other parts of the region where more traditional suburban growth was forecast. Of those figures on housing units, of that roughly doubling of housing units, 2/3 of that new housing would be in what's called the corridor part of West Sacramento. The SACOG forecasts essentially split growth into 3 types: new areas, established communities, and then corridor communities. And in our city, I guess the best way to frame those is that the area of Bridgeway Lakes and South, for lack of a better demarcation point, is considered a new growth area. Most of the rest of Southport is principally considered an established area, and so is a good chunk of the north. But areas that are centered around West Capitol Avenue and in the riverfront districts are classified as corridor communities. And so the vast majority, or roughly 2/3 of all the growth that's forecasted would be in that corridor area of the city. So that's consistent with what we've been forecasting with respect to the Bridge District and the Washington Pacific Plan area, Rayleigh's Landing, and the West Capitol Corridor. So those are significant. The other key driver in this process is the determination of what the transit priority areas are. And it's not just a planning exercise to figure out where you're going to assume higher levels of transit. The transit priority designation has specific implications for the CEQA relief in SB 375, as well as some priority with respect to how we're prioritizing transportation and transit funding resources. We have submitted 2, I think, areas in West Sacramento for consideration as a transit priority area designation, those being the West Capitol Corridor and the Washington Pacific Plan area, roughly. And those are both, those 2 plus Davis has submitted the Nishi property, which is just next to the freeway there. But those would be those are the 3 that have been submitted from Yolo County. We'll pare those down as we get further along. But that's an important component of this whole process. On the projects, this draft, the draft preferred scenario, which has to go through several additional iterations, includes everything. I think all of the projects that we had before in the MTP that were still live. We haven't crossed off much from West Sac just because the growth projections are still high for us. There are several smaller new added projects, but the major regional scale projects that are there that council should be aware of. The streetcar is in the MTP, the downtown riverfront streetcar, including Midtown Loop extension, but the full project is in the MTP. Carpool lanes between here and Davis are in the MTP. A new bike bridge over the causeway is in the MTP as well. That's partly because it's needed and partly because the space consumed by the current bike portion of the facility is needed for the addition of the carpool lanes. And then 2 new bridges or river crossings, as they're called in the MPP, are budgeted in the plan. That's not trivial because, as I said, because we've had to make cuts in what can be in the plan, dramatic cuts in the transportation projects that are there, there's a very strong bias towards only projects that there's a high level of confidence can be delivered. And so the fact that streetcar and both bridges are in the plan is a pretty significant statement of at least the regional scale commitment. The members of the Sacramento City Council that are on the board have been supportive, but it's not a trivial step for it to be in the MTP given the severe competition that there has been this round to get projects into it. So that'll be the next step. I'm going to be asking at SACOG tomorrow that we be more specific about the route with respect to the streetcar so that we can use that as part of our continuing planning and grant seeking efforts. But I think in general, the MTP, the set of projects and the forecasts are reflect pretty well our community's interest in terms of getting the right allocations from the region, both on growth, but mainly on the transportation projects. This will also affect the RENA allocations, RENA being the Regional Housing Needs Allocations, not the ARENA, I'll talk about that in a second. No, the RENA, Regional Housing Needs Allocations, that are now under SB 375 in terms of the time frame more closely aligned with the MTP, so we're developing the forecast for them together. It complicates the usual approach that cities like us take, which is during the MTP we say we want to grow as much as we possibly can, so you'll send us more transportation money. And then you get to the RENA process, and we traditionally say, well, we weren't planning on really growing at all. We're a steady state city. We can't handle any more growth. So under this new law, those processes happen together essentially, and so we have to. So our approach has been, let's figure out what the actual truth is, and we'll use it for both of those policies. But the RENA allocations and the affordable housing allocation stuff that will flow out of that I think the first draft of those are going to be coming out shortly as well. So
What is the time period that you're talking about?
the
planning.
the MTP
Planning.
plan is the 2035 time horizon.
2035.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, so we actually, because of all of these things, so the RENA time horizon is different, so those forecasts will look different. We have a different time horizon for the air quality conformity analysis that goes along with this, which is like 2021 or 2022, I can't remember exactly. And if I'm conflating some of them, it's possible, but because there's 3 or 4 different planning horizons in that period, the shortest one of which I think is 2020 and the longest one of which is 2035. Okay, and then since you mentioned it, the Here We Build committee, if you can call 70 people a committee, was appointed earlier this week. There was an executive committee meeting last week for the group, which I was not in town, so I didn't attend. But the first public meeting of that committee is tomorrow, tomorrow at 11 o'clock in the morning at the Sacramento Library. If anyone's interested in going, but we haven't had a meeting. Otherwise, I don't have any other information to share with the council around any of its progress. I'm more skeptical based on the vote taken today by the legislature to eliminate redevelopment that there's actually a solution to a $350 million project in an urban area. I can't think of one that hasn't had redevelopment involvement in California, but we'll see.
Did they include any of our legislators? That might be a good idea.
Well, it depends what you mean by our legislators.
Well,
so if you
That's
consider
true.
the maps from the Citizens
Yeah.
Commission, which are in draft form but are likely to be largely intact, then yes, they did. Assemblyman
Darrell is.
both Senator Steinberg and Assemblyman Dickinson are on the Here We Build group,
And
but not. Oh, and Assemblyman Pan is also. Those two are on the executive committee with me. Assemblyman Richard Pan is also on the larger group as well. But so yeah, everyone but Assemblywoman Yamada and Senator.
well, that
Hill will-
certainly should bode well for a future vote on the redevelopment agencies.
You would have thought so. So you would think so. So and I don't, Mr. City Manager, just on that, while we have the time, are we going to have a redistricting, at least discussion item at the council coming up?
We could set something up for the 20th.
Okay, yeah, I think
It's a fairly full agenda, so it'd probably just be a.
yeah, we wouldn't need much.
yeah.
I think, if we wanted to provide comments to the Citizens Commission, I don't know that we would, but if we wanted to, we would need at least a check-in. The other item is the Yolo County redistricting, and I know the Citizens Committee that's working on that is considering a variety of maps, which treat West Sacramento in disparate ways. We're now too big for one supervisorial district. We have 10,000 extra people, and so there are maps that pull Bridgeway Island and Bridgeway Lakes and put them in Davis. There are maps that take Brighton Broderick and put it with Woodland. I mean, something has to happen along those lines, but we at least ought to hear what those options are, and if we have comments, be able to weigh in before the vote's taken. So the 20th seems like a good time to do that. Okay. All right, if there's no other communications, item 1C's appointments and boards and commissions, we have none of those this evening. Brings us to the consent agenda, which is items 2 through 10. Any items on consent any member wishes to remove? Or any item for comments or questions? Stand in. Okay, item 7 is consideration of resolution 11-48, authorizing submittal of federal safe routes to school grants. Mr. Johannesson?
Who's Mike?
Mike Lucan?
All right.
Greta.
Okay. So I guess my only question here is that we're going through the bicycle pedestrian master plan this year. And is there any value that a grant like this would add to that planning? Basically, we could use these funds to help move forward that plan as well?
Yeah, absolutely. While the time frame associated with the updates of the Bike Ped Trails Master Plan is somewhat shorter than, should we receive this grant, the funding allotted to this, depending on what comes out of the evaluations and plans, it would only help us pursue additional funding in the future for whatever projects are called out with the Bike Ped Trails Master Plan update. And we plan to take whatever feedback we get during the update process of the Bike Ped Trails Master Plan and use that also with the walk audits and the plans for each individual school site.
All right, thank you.
Villegas? Okay. So this, this is non-infrastructure, and it's going to address the real issues, right?
It's a non-infrastructure grant. One of the things that is really important with both, there are two Safe Routes to Schools funding programs. One is federally sourced and one's state sourced. They're both administered by Caltrans, though, is that you have a tremendous amount of community involvement and even the planning process. So if we go out with a plan for infrastructure improvements, they want to see that we've not only reached out to the community, but we have their full support. And so this process will really set us up nicely to pursue the infrastructure components in the future. So it'll include the education, the encouragement efforts, as well as a plan for potential infrastructure improvements that we could hopefully then take to pursue the other additional funding sources to actually make those changes.
So, and Walk Sacramento has a lot of experience doing this, or?
Yeah, they do actually. They've conducted something very similar for the county of Sacramento. They did a subset of schools within the county that incorporate a portion of the county. They also did it for the Natomas Unified School District, and they're getting started doing it with the City of Citrus Heights.
And have they been doing this long enough for there to be any assessment of the impact on actual walking to school, or walking or other modes to school?
I don't have any information on that. I do know, however, that they have been able to take the process that was used to do this, and they've been able to successfully get infrastructure improvements funded. So I don't know offhand whether or not there's any information on the changes.
I mean, I'm paying attention to it just because I think that the two of the major drivers around the likelihood that a parent is going to have their child walk either alone or with them to school are is there a route that is safe? But second is this whole question around my child's going to get abducted, or something bad's going to happen. Which campaigns that only focus, only the smiley campaigns that didn't learn the lesson from the tobacco stuff don't get at. They don't sort of take that issue head on. And if you just say walking's great, walking's great, walking's great, walking's great, and you don't deal with the concerns that parents have about abductions and other stuff, then you don't solve it. No matter how great no matter how healthy it is and whatever, you don't deal with that fundamental fear that parents have that something horrible is going to happen.
The physical improvements, that's definitely something that we can make certain that we include in the educational and the encouragement efforts should we receive this funding.
Mr. Ledesma?
Yeah, this was a topic we came up during our city school 2x2 a couple of months ago, I think it was in Vegas. And, we asked, I think what both of the district board members and ourselves felt good about is that the right stakeholders, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we got the sense that the stakeholders, a lot of stakeholders would be involved in this process. That was one of the benefits of it, is that would gather large amounts of information from folks who maybe, don't have a voice into what would be our public works type of projects. So it would give them that access. So I think as long as that was one of the benefits of it, so we felt comfortable sort of advocating for it when Mr. Lucan came to that meeting and briefed us on it. This was something we can pursue. So I'm glad to see it here. I think the mayor's comments are kind of spot on, and we need to maybe direct as stakeholders get involved and we get involved, our staff gets involved, make sure we get that feedback in. That would be great.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the wonderful things about this is that it's not only going to be us disseminating information, but it also provides us an opportunity to really hear those concerns and then have follow-up and continuing education over a period of time.
Yeah, it's like when we do back in the last century when we had the traffic committee was a city council subcommittee, and I used to hear, when I was chairing that committee, like all the stop sign requests and the speed bump requests and whatever. There's a balance between getting sort of stakeholder neighborhood engagement, and then, but there's actually known science about this work too, right? And it's not just bringing people together in a room and saying, what would you like to see and what do you want, but also helping neighborhood residents and community members and parents in this case understand, get a clear understanding first of what's the actual, what are the risks of abduction? They're like 0.0000. You're more likely to get struck by lightning on the way to school. I mean, it's thinking through and helping the citizens in the community get as much knowledge as they can, and then asking them to engage in what are the right set of solutions and approaches. And so you bring together expertise and science and all that along with the community engagement together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've kind of envisioned it. I don't know if any of you were involved in any traffic calming programs. It would be very similar to that, going out and educating about the different tools that are available and some of the statistics involved with a variety of things, be they physical changes or otherwise, and then have it be slightly more interactive follow-up meetings.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, those were the only questions on the consent agenda. Is there a motion? Moved by Mr. Biegs and seconded by Mr. Ledesma. No further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and opposed, hearing none, motion carries. Item 11 is continuation of the public hearing and consideration of Joint Resolution 11-25 and 11-38, authorizing the city manager or executive director the authority to remove Union Pacific Railroad revisionary rights and a portion of South River Road in the Bridge District, which are proposed to be abandoned to the adjacent property owners. And staff, the city manager has requested that we continue the public hearing on these items to a date uncertain. So, is there an objection?
I'll take that. No objection. Take it for a motion.
Sure.
All right, make a motion for the recommended action. We move it to a date uncertain. Continue it to a date uncertain.
That's been moved by Mr. Desmond, second by Mr. Villegas. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and opposed, hearing none, motion carries. Item 12 is consideration of the budget for fiscal years 2011 and 12 and 2012-13, or in the alternative, consideration of City Resolution 11-51 and Agency Resolution 11-52, authorizing continuation of municipal operations based on fiscal year 2010-11 budget. Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Mayor, council members, you have before you, for your consideration and adoption, the operational budget for fiscal years 11-12 and 12-13. Next month, you'll have an opportunity to adopt the CIP. Once both budgets have been adopted, we will then have what we call a final budget for publication. Now, because you received a very in-depth workshop last month considering the strategies for balancing this budget, I'm going to make this presentation very short. Basically, I'd like to point out a couple of things here. First of all, this is a balanced budget. It is an operational budget. The strategies that were implemented to balance this budget were presented at your workshop and are contained within the staff report. Recap to present it. There, you may notice some supplementals have some negative figures. That's a little unusual. What we've done this year was because of the budget constraints, we've asked a number of departments who were requesting supplemental extras to either come up with a new form of revenues to help offset it or cut costs in other areas. So what we did was we showed you the negative offsets in the supplementals as well as their request. Now, each department should have a representative here to answer any questions you may have concerning both the supplementals and their particular budget. The only other thing that I'd like to add is that in the event if you feel uncomfortable passing this operational budget, we would request that you pass resolutions 1151 and 1152, which would allow the city to operate in the month of July.
We don't kick the can down the road here. Did you just come from the state capitol? We will be adopting a balanced budget now.
Okay. Now, one little caveat before I terminate this presentation. We are still recommending adoption of this budget, even though there were some adverse state actions that occurred with redevelopment today. We don't know what the fiscal impact is of that offhand. So there's no reason to modify this budget that's presented to you at this point. If in the future we find that there needs to be a strategy developed to deal with that, we'll be back to you to alternatively we need to modify this budget. And with that, I'll open up any questions you may have.
Mayor Pro Tem Christoph.
Yeah, did we, were we successful in extending that police grant? There was a police grant we were going to ask for waiver for from the federal government, and it allowed us to keep other positions. Might have been fire. No, it was police.
I can,
Fire. It was fire then. I'm sorry, it was fire.
Sir, if you're going to talk without the microphone, I'm going to have to ask that you be ejected.
Yeah, right.
yes, we were not going to seek a waiver until we were nearing the end of that grant.
Oh, all
Because we
right,
felt
okay.
that if we sought the waiver now, it'd simply be denied.
Okay.
So it would be planned in the second year that we do.
Second year. All right. Very good. Thank you.
Johansson?
All right. What I want to do is just kind of go through some of these supplemental requests. One of the problems I think we're going to have is what I'm focusing on are salary increases right now in this economy, particularly when we're looking at laying off people. It's one thing we don't want to be doing is giving salary increases. So I'm kind of looking at where I see those as being potentially problematic. Maybe they're justified, maybe they aren't. But the first is in human resources. It's a small amount. But I'd just like to maybe get an explanation of why we're having a salary increase here. This is 1A in human resource.
Councilmember Johansson, that is actually not a salary increase. That is simply taking a position that last year was reduced to 90% and moving it back to 100%. And we took other money that we had and reduced other money in other areas of the budget. So there should be a negative that balances out the increase in the salary.
Okay, thank you. All right. And the next, on the police administration, we have 4 or 5 personnel that are 80% compensation will be upgraded to 100%, but we're offsetting it with a termination. So
we tried an experiment this current year we were in. We reduced 5 full-time positions that we had to 80%. So they equaled 4 FTEs. So the loss was 1 FTE. So what we're doing is just saying, you know, we tried that for a year and it's not working. The duties of the assigned positions are falling behind. And so we need to do something different. So we took the same money and just took the same amount of dollars. So there's no supplemental, there's no increase, or at least I remember there was no increase in it unless there's a very small one. None. And we just spread the money back and raised the 4 positions to 100%, much like Director Wright was just saying in his department, where they tried this for a year. So we're doing the same thing. It's the same amount of dollars. We're just reallocating. It's unfortunate that it's going to result in a loss of a position, but for effectiveness and service to the community, it's something that has to be done. Wouldn't be recommending it if it really didn't need to be done.
So in this short 1-year period, you found that what you were trying to do was just not working at all? Was it that evident?
Yes, very evident. This is not just my decision made in a nutshell. It's the consensus of our management team that, yeah, things are not working. We have to do something to fix the operation, and this was the way to do it.
Okay.
Very unpleasant, I understand.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I if there's a way to manage, I don't know particularly how far behind this got you, but what we're trying to do is save as many jobs as possible. I'm just a little bit concerned that
Oh, I certainly understand.
Year short of time, and we're losing someone, and that not only, of course, there's a personal story to that person who's terminated, but there's also the effect on the economy and the lack of financial support that we're getting for layoffs in general.
No,
so,
I certainly understand. We do have sympathy for that situation, but it's a consensus that this is the proper move to make, even though it's a very difficult choice.
Okay. Are there any others? I didn't see really any others, the supplemental request.
Not for police.
in the police. Okay, okay, thank you.
We're living within the budget that we have.
Right, right. That's it,
Thank
thanks. And the only other issue I have, public utilities, there's a line item here for laptop replacement. Is that one laptop? $6,500?
To my knowledge, it is.
One laptop for $6,500. Someone's got to take a look at that. I mean, it's not a lot of money, but you have to kind of, laptops are cheap. I don't know what kind of software you're putting on there, but it looks like there is some specific monitoring type software. But that's a lot of money. And, particularly when we're looking at $1,000, $2,000 on some of these position shifts, we should be looking, those things as well.
Find out.
All right. Those are all the comments I have.
Other questions or comments?
Doug,
Pro Tem Christoph?
how do you handle as of today, we don't have all the bargaining units and all of the various negotiations completed. Does that get plugged into the budget later as they are completed?
Star might be a little bit better.
I can,
He's headed for the door. No, let's, here comes Evelyn.
We've actually identified target numbers for
Uh-huh.
all the different concessions that we're asking of employees.
Okay.
And we've included that into all our department budgets in hope that, and then we'll true it up later when we actually get the finalized numbers
Okay.
after negotiations have been complete.
Okay, thank you.
Comments? Mr. Villegas?
Yeah, if I can just follow, so just so that we're all tracking on the same page, so just follow up to what Bill said. So, in essence, the budget itself assumes in part that there are concessions to be had, or that there are things that are gonna have to get shored up. And without it, there is not a balanced budget. So in essence, what we're saying is, this is what we have to do, and that the money's gotta come from somewhere, and at some point, that's what'll allow us to be balanced. Sure. Sure. Well, that's the, right. Yep. Thank you, Doug.
Mr. Ledesma?
Thank you. Thanks for all the work. I know we did have a long workshop at the, on the previous discussion on this, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I did look through the supplemental requests, and I'm glad Mr. Johansson did ask a couple of questions that I had for clarification. I am looking at the fire emergency service supplemental requests, and I'm not seeing these before, and most of them had on those three things. Or I don't see on those offsets. Am I missing something in those, or we're talking about standby management, the safer grants, which you just explained, I think, in terms of how that will be handled, and the fuel cost increase.
there are no offsets for those. Those are actually incremental costs,
For those,
reflecting either changes of an operation or changes in expected costs. The actual projected increase in fuel costs was about $17,000. We held them to a $5,000 increase, and they need to save in their fuel consumption to keep it down to that level.
okay, so these will be a cost that we'll just be absorbing then.
Well,
Is that-
in essence, when you look at all the totals of the supplementals, those are the incremental additions. There are reductions in other aspects of the budget, and so we have a total budget that's reflected here, but
Right,
in
we'll
those
just offset
instances, there are
somewhere
no
else.
offsets for
Yeah.
those.
I got you. Okay. I don't have any other questions at this time, but I just wanted to get clarification on that. Thank you.
Every other agency in the county's had 17 hours of budget hearings. We can't just do this in I think this is a very solid document, and the focus, the questions about the specific elements of the supplementals are very appropriate, and that's our job to oversee. I think just for context, though, if you remove the safer piece, which for the fire department, which is a no-brainer for this community in terms of being able to provide that. Then we've got less than $100,000 of general fund supplementals on a budget of nearly $40 million. So it's there's not we definitely don't have runaway spending that's proposed in this budget. It's extraordinarily conservative budget in terms of how we do the operations, and that's because both the management team with a lot of engagement and participation and creative ideas and flexible work assignments and job descriptions and from this whole team has been just extraordinary. And as you read the news from other jurisdictions that are close by, some very close by, and the stark contrast between where what both their team members and their citizens are being asked to bear in terms of substantial sacrifices and risks relative to what we're doing here is I think we should be proud. I mean, this is a very difficult budget, and it requires deep sacrifice and concessions from everyone that's involved in the city organization, and that's which I want to talk about in a moment. But I do think it's a testament to the ongoing work that the entire team at all of city government, from everyone in the organization, has made to try to be responsible and thoughtful and community-minded from the very beginning, when it was clear that years ago that we need to start really paying attention to changes that were happening in the economy, and this reflects that. And so, for residents of our community who are reading about 80 police officers being laid off across the river, and where this budget, assuming that the labor agreements are reached, doesn't propose any of that, and that's a consequence of a lot of good fiscal policy, but also a team of city employees that's deeply committed to the community and to public service. And so, as has been indicated, this budget depends heavily on those agreements being reached, and I think we have every indication from our interactions with our employee partners that there's a continued willingness to make sacrifices, and I think we're hopeful that those agreements will be reached. So this is not a pie in the sky dream. It's really what is required, and it's measured, and it's within the mainstream of what public employees throughout the region are offering and conceding to as part of these negotiations that are going on throughout the region, throughout the state, throughout the country. And it is critical that moves forward, and it can't be minimized, because the level of cuts and layoffs that would be required if those don't proceed to appropriate conclusion will be severe. And so the impact on employees and on the community and the level of service and public safety would be potentially compromised. At the same time, I know there are, we all read about this in the news media about pensions and public compensation and all these other issues, and we're committed to being responsible, and so far those employee groups that we've worked with have been as well. But I want to say publicly that some of the criticisms have been leveled that have tried to make it appear as though that they're the sort of nefarious public employees trying to grab as much as they could is. It's unfair, and it is a slap in the face to a group of people, at least in our community, who have, even sometimes when not asked, but certainly when asked and called upon, have made every sacrifice and weren't asking anything of us that people weren't. It's like complaining about people buying an extra TV 5 years ago. Well, that's what was part of what economic growth was, and people were trying to provide for their families, and we were all a part of that, including the community, including folks who would come to City Hall and demand that we give more raises or more retirement. We were all part of that process, and appropriately so. We've been a very successful community in the last decade, and it's in large measure due to the team of people that work here and dedicate their lives to us. And so, although we need to make appropriate reductions and dial back some of what we have done, it is not where we are is not the result of any evil agenda or ill intent by the folks that work for our community and the labor groups that represent them. And so we have a collective responsibility to solve that together, and not deal with it as a matter of blame, just as a matter of fiscal reality. And I think that with this budget and the conversations that are going on with our employees are part of the effort to accomplish that in a reasonable, mature way that appropriately shares that responsibility. Mr. Ledesma?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to make just a quick comment. And this being my first budget cycle with this team, I did want to comment on some of what the mayor has said, that I've been not sure what to expect or what these conversations would be like or what this process would be like. I have to commend all of you on the work you've done. It's obviously been a lot of work you've been going through. And from my own personal experience, I know these are tough decisions you have to make, and there are people involved and people's lives involved. And but I've been just amazingly pleased with kind of how everyone's conducted themselves with this, and not just the professionalism you showed, but the work you've done. It is I've gone through it when it's come up and looked for areas that I thought might need some clarification. The city manager's been very forthcoming in the information to me offline, and but I just wanted to say that to all of you. I know this is extremely hard work. You're going through something that every other municipality and every other company is doing as well, and but you guys, all of the staff, management team, has done an incredible job in making these decisions, and it is a budget that I think we could be proud of. It's nothing that's easy. It's nothing that we are this group of people up here that I've observed take lightly. We understand the decisions you make affect people that you work with, people that serve our city, and it certainly shows. So I just wanted to make that comment, and thank you.
And there is an impact on services, and we said it in the State of the City address, and we've done everything we can, and our employees, by the finance director is willing to be a parks maintenance worker for one day a week. Whatever, people in our organization have been doing whatever is necessary to keep the services going at a high quality. But if you're looking at some of our the number of fewer people that are in our organization, the 85 positions down that we would be in a city out of just over 300. That's not trivial, and I think for most of my neighbors, they're certainly not. They have not seen a 25 or 30 or 40% reduction in their level of service. Maybe the off-ramp's been picked up a little less often than it was. There's little things here and there, but in terms of the amount of bite to the organization, I think it's commendable to the staff for being able to preserve that, and frankly to the residents of the community who have not sweated the small stuff. It's not as though we're getting every time street sweeping changes from being 5 times every 2 months to 4 times every 2. We don't get a crowd of people in here, because people in our community, when you go out and talk you're at the Little League games or whatever, they get it, they understand, and they appreciate that we're fiscally healthy to a point where we're able to provide good quality, comprehensive services, and they haven't. Residents in this community have been responsible as well in terms of their expectations about what the level, the kinds of services that we can provide as a city. And then there has been creative. Last night we had the concert on the Riverwalk, which wasn't, we've had that concert series for the last several years, and it's just one small example. We couldn't fund it anymore, and we had to make a decision. We wanted to maintain the full company at Station 45, and we wanted to make sure we didn't lose any cops on the street, and we wanted to maintain other critical services, and we could no longer fund the Harmony on the River concert series, even though it wasn't that much money. And the Parks Department staff kept the smiles up, kept hope alive, and they found one of those food trucks to come out and sponsor, pay for the band, and cover all the costs of it. And it's those little things that add up to a lot as people find, as Mr. Johannes is fond of saying, helping public-private partnerships and folks come together to identify solutions that are out there to minimize the negative impacts of what is a severe distress on the organization. But I do think we have to be clearer and clearer with our community and with others that, you know, you can't lose 85 people and nothing changes. And we need to be honest about what those implications are and about the capacity of our people in the organization to, you know, some of whom working what used to be 2 or 3 positions, they can't work 7 or 8 positions. We are at or just beyond the limit of this organization to be able to deal with this sort of strain. And what we do if this redevelopment legislation is signed into law is we're going to be back here with even more severe challenges. Mr. Villegas.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. You know, your comment earlier about we can't possibly pass this budget without some conversation about it, and I think we're going to fill up that time here pretty quickly. But you're absolutely right, though. This does not this has not happened by itself. I mean, if you go back, we've had several years of very, very difficult decisions and sacrifices by a whole lot of people, and I think some of which these positions are being restored this evening. Those tough decisions were borne by everybody stepped up to bear some part of the responsibility of the collective problem. But I think a lot of what has happened is accumulation of things that have been occurring and the tough decisions that have been made year after year after year from day one. I mean, the city manager should get some recognition for his willingness to step forward and set out a course for us to make some very difficult decisions. And I think as a part of that, the council each year stepped up each January to set out a strategic plan so that these decisions that are, you know, obviously very, very difficult in balancing our budget have not come just once a year. They come several times a year throughout the course of the year because of the direction that's set pretty early on. And I just wanted to note one of the things that I really did appreciate, and although it's a little thing, I think it goes to what your point about earlier this evening, and that is our community accepting a lot of what we've had to do to make this balanced budget work, and that is at the community room at Station 45. I was there yesterday, and as a result of some of the cuts that have been taken, there's a little sign, and albeit it's very little, and it's almost kind of behind the door, you may not notice it if you go into the community room. It explains in there, as a result of some of the budget cuts, what savings has occurred, but consequently, the room doesn't get cleaned every day like it might have otherwise. And although it's a silly little thing, I think it's important to note that it recognizes these are the kinds of things that over time cumulatively do add up to allowing us to kind of to balance our budget. And that was a good way to kind of recognize. And for folks, I was there with the meeting, and it was nice to be able to present to folks, showing, look, here are some things, some simple things, albeit, but it does reflect the impact that's being taken by the results of some of the cuts we've made here. So, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Christoph.
I too would just sort of like to reiterate, and I'd like to thank Evelyn and Toby and for the leadership that you put together as far as working with each department, because each department head has to have input, and each department head has to come up with a plan for their department. And you know, certainly is sacrifice, and you know, I think all of us up here wish we could grow, but you know, the finances really dictate that we can't grow. We can't continue to hire, you know, additional people, and we are making some very, very difficult choices as far as staffing levels. And so, you know, it is going to be very important that we move forward down the road, and I just hope the assumptions that we have made for future negotiations, I hope they pan out. I mean, because, you know, it's going to be very, very difficult times, and we see what's happening in the region. I mean, I would say that if I look at the issues that West Sacramento is dealing with compared to the issues that are going on within the region, the number of people being laid off and the number of departments being, you know, just disseminated, just decimated, that, you know, we are, we're holding our own. We're doing fairly well. I mean, it's not the greatest in the world, but I mean, at the same time, I think decisions that we made 2, 3, 4 years ago, and just sort of chipped away at some of the issues are coming to bear some fruit now, whereas it's just not as severe as in other locations. So I'd just like to thank Toby and Carol and his staff, along with all of you department heads and all of our workforce, because I know you correspond with them, you ask them questions, you bounce ideas off of them. And we've seen all that. We've seen each department come in with a list of, what are possible cuts. And they may have been everything from paper clips to computers. But and it was very helpful. And I think the council really appreciates those things. So I just want to say thanks.
Johannesson.
Yeah, I think members of council have really expressed sentiment of how I feel about the process, but just maybe a couple of overarching things I think we've been able to do. The last resort is laying people off, particularly in this economy. We had some discussion about movements within the departments, and it looks like we've done a fairly good job at that. There's always room to improve, but I'll continue to be looking at that issue, because it really does. We're trying to get out of this recession. We're going to get out of this recession by creating jobs and not creating unemployed. So it's really important, even at this local level, to deal with that. I'd like to also commend the staff in their working with the representative groups in West Sacramento, that what we've been able to do here through negotiation at the table with our representative groups is we've been able to deal with people fairly and also with respect and with a sense of shared sacrifice. And I think that distinguishes us from other cities or other states, for that matter, that reject the notion that collective bargaining is a way of it's a thing of the past, because it's definitely worked here, and that's a major factor in how we've got to where we are now, is the fair negotiation between the different groups. And finally, I know staff is doing this, but just keep vigilant on those little things, like the laptop, and just little things like that. If we could save a couple $1,000 here, a couple $1,000 there, if we're looking at this budget, and $2,000 or $3,000, we can do quite a bit with. That could mean a little bit extra service. It could be just a little bit more. So just keep trying to squeeze wherever you can find it.
Further questions or comments? All right, so the city manager is requesting that the council adopt this operational budget, and as Doug said, the final budget adoption will come when the CIP is complete, and when we've done the same thing as this on the CIP, they would come together as the final budget. And by that point, presumably, we would have a better sense, although perhaps not a final sense if it's in the courts for the next 3 years, of outcome on the redevelopment piece, and perhaps a better update on the progress with respect to the labor negotiations. Is there a motion on item 12? It's been moved by Mr. Johannesson.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Ledesma. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't want to be self-congratulatory, but I want to commend the council. I mean, there are plenty of examples in the political world where it's not possible for a group of elected officials to make mature decisions and lead. And this council has done that consistently. And this budget's one example of it. It's a clear example of it. The willingness to make hard choices, but not making them harder than they have to be by exacerbating them. And the council's been good. I think has helped the staff feel comfortable coming up with creative ideas, embedding them appropriately, asking all the right questions, providing the support where it's necessary. And I think the council has a lot to be proud of for its work in this regard. Council calendar.
Yes, this is the last meeting of June, and we don't have another meeting until July 20th, so we have perhaps the longest hiatus in council
history
memory. So we will be back on the 20th with a fairly large agenda.
Don't meet until July 20th?
And it happens because the second meeting in June is pretty early in the month, and then we're not having a meeting immediately following the 4th of July.
Any questions on the calendar? City manager report.
You have heard, and we're just beginning to hear the implications for redevelopment, and we anticipate having a large meeting of staff on Friday where we'll attempt to lay out some of the implications. We've received descriptions of what is proposed, and we're translating that at this point into dollar implications. We're very much concerned, but there's a lot of unanswered questions that we'll try to answer over the next few days. I do also want to echo what the council said. It's really been a pleasure to work with the staff, including people who are rather remotely related to the budget, and but who cooperated in any number of ways to make this possible. This was not an easy budget for us because we had a hard time pinning down costs, pinning down revenues, and a lot of things changed. And Evelyn would come to my office quite frequently saying, well, we've got to start all over. We've got to do it again. We have to change something. And everybody stuck together. The department heads were miraculous in the sense of keeping a citywide view, no competition between the departments, no efforts to get something at the expense of someone else. And then I think that the council truly sets the context for that kind of attitude. We know that we're not trying to game the council, and the council has given us the respect of the professional attention to this problem, and it's worked for us. It's not a fun time when we're trying to draft a budget when we're facing financial constraints, but it's a lot better when you're working together as a team than when you're working against each other. So that's I really also want to say that this is the last budget that both Doug and Evelyn will be doing for the city of West Sacramento, and I really want to thank both of them for the excellent work they've provided.
And name it after them? Which one gets 2011-12 and one of them gets 11-12-13? Was that the city manager? Did we already move to city manager report, or was that the calendar just now?
That was
City manager report. Okay. City attorney report. Staff directions for members of the council. Future agenda items. Because actually, I realized when you talked about redistricting on the 20th, that in my head I was thinking the 20th of this month, even though I knew that's not possible. That won't work for either of the processes, because I believe the state commission, the hearing that they're having that would cover our area is the end of this month or the early part of July. And the county process, I think the committee that's making its recommendations final meeting is June 29th. So.
Would you be interested in having us send you information in newsletter format to at least give you the background, and if you had individual comments, you could relay them to us? Okay, and then we'll do that.
All right. Okay. Right. Is there a motion to adjourn then? I'll move. Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.